Eric, thank you so much for joining us. I know the listeners are really going to dig this. As I said, our missions are kind of cut from the same cloth, are woven from the same cloth. Today we're going to be talking about going from an entrepreneur to a BlissPreneur, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's I've seen Eric speak. Once again, this is another connection through the group Maverick 1000. Incredible organization. I just seem to be meeting the best people in the world through them. So big shout out to Yannick.
Who's in Antarctica as we speak, leading a very adventurous group. Yes.
Very, very. Yeah, they're always on doom buggies, on glaciers, on safaris,
doing polar plunges. Yes.
Yeah. They know how to have fun. So I'm really excited to get into it. So Eric, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's jump on that awesome slide you just showed me, and really give a detailed understanding on what the difference is and how to get from one to another. Sound good?
Sure. Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur since age 25, and I've never taken a paycheck from anybody other than myself since that day, 26 years ago. I'm 51. I own just over 20 businesses currently. My wife owns another half dozen to a dozen. And that's not to impress anybody. A lot of those are real estate holding companies, but we're operators, and we've been at it for quite some time. So you learn a thing or two over the decades. And probably the clearest thing I could say about myself is I'm a dreamer. I've always been a dreamer, and I do things based on my dreams. I don't do things based on, I think the market would want that or need that, or I have an invention that nobody else has thought of, right? I typically decide what I desire, and then I go for it. And a lot of times I acquire it as an asset, and then I build a business around it. So that's my MO. And I just want to share with you today something that my business partner on the mentoring and coaching side, the great Patrick Combs, came up with me. So you see this good, Tim?
Yep, I can see it perfectly.
All right. So this is your typical model of entrepreneurism. At the middle of this center here is the word success. Most people that become entrepreneurs, that's their goal, is to become successful, right? As entrepreneurs. And what we first find out as entrepreneurs is that you got to work your ass off, right? So at the top of that little circle, you got to be a workhorse to make a business work and to get off the ground. But what you find along the way is you're mainly doing what others want. Right? Yeah. Initially, you might think it's what you want to do, but then it's like, okay, I got customers, right? I got vendors, I got shareholders, I got investors, I got my family, I got everybody telling me what they need. And then most businesses are very rational, like, I want to start a podcast. Who would I service in that said podcast, right? Just to use your example, we're very rational. And if I get a certain number of customers, then this. And along the way, we learned that sacrifice is a big part of being an entrepreneur. So pick a area of your life that you're willing or unwilling or unknowingly are about to sacrifice. And that's very, very common for entrepreneurs. In my case, for many years, it was my health, right? My health came a distant last compared to my entrepreneurial efforts. And usually along the way, you start to gain two things. You start to get paid through money and significance. Is that Tim Palladino that just walked in the bar? Like he does that podcast, right? Or
happens all the time.
Company, right? So, us entrepreneurs, we like that. We like respect. We like to be known for our inventions or our businesses. And then of course, money on top of that, that goes with it, right? You're no longer just walking in any little shady little nightclub. You're walking in the club, right? And people are like, oh, wow. So, but then we also learn along the way that task management is the reward of growth. And so I can't tell you how many times I built a global company, and I gave away, I didn't have to, but I gave away all the cool jobs to my employees because the employees want the cool jobs.
Yeah.
Right. So when you really start to grow, what you end up with as the founder is like accounting, tax, legal, administrative, talking to like the insurance person, and you're like, wait a minute, where did all the cool jobs go that I handed out? And then your big focus is on a BHAG. So we've all heard that before. If you have an audience, that means a big, hairy ass goal. And that's typically what entrepreneurism is all about. And you're trying to be successful along the way. So being an entrepreneur is very self-made and business centered. That's what it's about. And the primary growth measurements are money and numbers, right? So at the end of the quarter, you're usually reporting on the number of sales, number of customers acquired, and or revenue, right? Or expenses, things like that. But the hidden side of entrepreneurism is that it's extremely mechanical, right? It can be life-taking. On another podcast, I could tell you a different story about how it almost took my life, grinding and grinding and grinding. When you become successful, it can become very isolating. You would think that, oh, I'm so successful, everyone thinks I'm great, they all want to talk to me. But actually, how many people can now relate to you, right? And how isolated are you, and how targeted are you for your checkbook? You know, there's so many things that start to go into that you don't understand that they're even there. And sure, the audience could say, oh, those are first world problems. Well, wait till you have them. They really feel like something different. They feel like something personal, and it becomes isolating. Show me a billionaire and I'll show you somebody who's rather isolated. And then finally, it starts to feel unfair, because it's like, wait a minute, I kicked ass at this model. I won. I did everything I was supposed to do. And why am I feeling some of these things, right? They don't feel very rewarding to me. So let's compare the difference. So can you kind of see both of these now?
Yep.
Okay, so a BlissPreneur, which is what my partner and I advocate for, is a different model. Instead of just being a workhorse, you're doing more of who you always wanted to be. I would imagine Tim feels like that every time he does a podcast.
Absolutely. Actually, our tagline is to help you become better at what you do and more who you are.
Correct. So you're being more of who you are by doing a podcast, say, than your prior business that you sold, right? And then instead of what others want, you're doing what you want. I mean, who would argue right now that Tim and I are not doing what we want? Right?
I'm pretty comfortable.
There's a lot of ways I know how to make money, but I choose to be here with Tim right now, and I'm having a blast. There's nothing I'd rather be doing right now. So I'm doing what I want, right? And then with being a BlissPreneur, it can often be irrational. An example of what's irrational. Have you ever, do you know what a busker is? Do you know what a busker is, Tim?
A busker? B-U-S-K-E? No.
At the most basic element, it's like a street performer that puts their hat out, and they do whatever, magic, they play they play a saxophone, whatever, and they collect tips. Well, there was a guy once that saw a busker and said to himself, oh, that's a business. That's going to be an incredible business. I want to turn buskers into an international sensation. Well, that was Guy Liberté, and he founded Cirque du Soleil, and now he's the 18th richest man in Canada, and he's actually been to space with the Russians in the space station. So here's a guy that saw street performers. So there was nothing rational about his initial thoughts about turning that into something, a multi-billion-dollar organization, right? And then instead of sacrifices, you start to find that you're giving your greatest gifts. Right? And there's a big tide change here, right? And then instead of just being paid through money and significance, maybe there's 7 different ways that you like to get paid. I know money and respect come in at about 6 and 7 for me, but I have 5 other ways I like to get paid. I like to get paid in my dreams coming true. I like to get paid through inspiration. That's why I'm here today, because sign me up. Get a chance to inspire a few folks, I'm in. Right? Or to be inspired back. Number 3 are goosebump moments. We might have one of those today, Tim, if we keep talking. Those are really wonderful ways to get paid for me. Number 4 is beauty. So if you saw my homes and you see the screen behind me, I'm trying to help people get from that gray world here to this world over here, and whatever that means to them. So I love beauty. And then finally, gratitude. So I'm mostly the CEO and the founder. So people aren't usually writing paychecks to me. So one of the best ways I like to get paid is in gratitude, if it's authentic and if it's real. So that doesn't leave out respect and money. It just means I've pushed it down the list a little bit. And then instead of task management, you get enjoyable to-dos, right? That's a big difference. Like, I'm not focused on my legal and tax all the time. I'm like, who do I get to mentor today? What retreat do I get to plan today? What retreat do I get to run today? And then instead of a BHAG, you got a joyful call to a grand adventure. And so to wrap up here, you're not self-made and business-centered. You're more soul-centered and self-actualized, which resonates with your journey, right? And instead of the growth measurements being money and numbers, it's moments. It's measured in moments. right? And that doesn't mean a guy like me forgets how to make money. I bring that skill set to the table most times, but I'm really looking forward to the next moment. I'm planning the next moment, or I'm in presence practice trying to figure out how to have perfect joy, just doing nothing.
Yeah.
But that's a moment as well. And so ultimately, being a BlissPreneur is not mechanical, it's magical. It's not life-taking, it's life-giving. And it doesn't make you isolated, it makes you more connected. And it doesn't bring unfair thoughts, it brings joy.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, this is what we teach at Bliss Champions. And our focus is on people. It doesn't really matter what age they are, but we sure do get our hands on a lot of kind of 35 to 55-year-olds that have been successful. And they're like, is that it? Like, this feels unfair. Like, I did everything right and I'm missing something. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a coaching program that we ran. It was a proactive, ongoing discipline system. And one of the first things that we had to establish is, where's your pain coming from? And what does a pleasure look like? Because I know I wasn't programmed to know. I was programmed to work hard and hope, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's just not the right way, because on top of that, there's no measurement. What am I measuring? Like, how am I defining success? So I really, really like the stepping stones here.
Well, and I think the biggest missing piece for most entrepreneurs is the way that they're taught, and the way they come out of the gate is, hey, find something in the marketplace that someone needs or sees value in, and then fill it. The problem with that being the only way of thinking is that you're not actually addressing your own desires. And so what a person might argue is, yes, I am, because if I fill a need in the marketplace that somebody wants and desires, I'm going to be rich.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So now we're talking about ways to get rich. And what I notice in most entrepreneurs is they don't understand the following. It typically takes 3 years to get profitable in a business. So you're certainly not getting rich in those first 3 years while you're bypassing paying yourself in order to reinvest into the business. And then most businesses start to decline if they even make it that far by year 8.5. And then I think there's some crazy stat out there. It's like 96% of businesses are out of business by year 10. So if these stats are true, and I believe the labor statistics are, that gives you a 5.5 year window to earn. So if you're not paying yourself significantly through years 4 through 8.5, guess what? You're not going to be rich. And I would then argue that what most people do is they focus on income if they're an employee, or they focus on top line revenue if they're an entrepreneur. The problem with that is that the only strategy there is savings ultimately. And I believe that a strategy of savings to become wealthy is a piggy bank with a hole in it. All you have to do is look at a $250,000 salary and say you have that 5.5 year window. Well, the average American saves less than 10% of their net pay.
Yeah.
So on an example that way, 5.5 years of real earning at that level, you'd pay about $75,000 in taxes. Let's just argue if you live in Texas, less any state that doesn't have income tax, but let's just say you have $150,000 in overall net pay. Well, you're going to be saving less than 10% of that. So that's 15 grand. 15 grand times 5.5 years. Does anybody do that math and feel like, holy shit, I'm wealthy in America?
Yeah. You can maybe take a year off.
Correct. So the over focus on that, I want people to understand that what income and revenue represent are lifestyle.
Yeah.
You want to improve your lifestyle. You want to go get nicer clothes, better cars, and I don't know, take more exotic vacations. Then focus on your income and your revenue, and that will be yours. But if you want to build wealth, you need to be looking at assets.
Yeah.
Assets are what builds wealth. Income and revenue is what actually builds lifestyle. And so that's another big area that I love to teach. So I think most entrepreneurs, they're focused on 4 things. They say, if I could just get financial freedom then, and then they get financial freedom and they say, gosh, if I just had time freedom. And then after that, they say, if I just had time freedom without guilt, that one I love. And then they have time freedom and they have all the money in the world. And then what? My joy meter is really low. I just want more joy in my life, right? And then finally, if you don't have love, what's life all about, right?
Yeah.
So at the end, what we do as entrepreneurs is we make it linear, unfortunately. And that's why most of my customers are 40 to 50-year-olds, because I'm actually coaching and mentoring on joy.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It really is. It really is. And like stepping back a couple of steps, my personal experience, my personal journey, I really thought it was about money, it was so I can have things. And then I was like, no. And then I realized it's about having options, the when, how, and where I do things.
Yeah.
And it's not about having a faster car than someone else. It's about whatever brings me joy. Maybe it's a personal chef. Like it could be anything. It doesn't have to be the things that other people want. It was what's the old saying? It's the comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah. And you're just describing what you're describing is lifestyle improvements, right?
Yeah.
Like I have a chef, I've had fancy cars. I'm even building a yacht right now. So I totally get all those things, but I put them all through a different lens. I put them through the lens of joy first. And I say, wow, how my health would improve, how I would love getting to know different foods, and how I would love to eat well, right? Yeah. So everything's put through a lens of joy these days. And I wish as entrepreneurs, we weren't so linear, right? Because you could end up waiting your whole life to be financially secure enough to have the things that you really desire, right? Where you can flip it, you can do all these things at the same time. You don't have to wait till you're 50 to be like, okay, now I deserve joy. Now I deserve the things that I want, because sometimes those things never come.
And I hope that it's an inevitability that we make that shift in, I'm going to say consciousness, where we're not working to live. I'm sorry, we're not living to work. We're, working to live and build life.
Yeah.
And not.
But I'll tell you, when you only know one model, that success model, and you're 50 years old, and you got a couple kids getting ready to go off to expensive colleges. And I'll tell you, you
hold on
think
tight
that by age 50 that your limiting beliefs would be shedded. And you are so entrenched at that point that the work that we do with individuals like that, it's really, really challenging work to get them out of their staunch positions and belief systems. And so, personal development is really, Tim, just about two things. It's about helping people get unstuck. And then there's an entire multi-billion-dollar industry of helping people do that. Everything, the newest is psychedelics and the oldest is talk therapy, and everything in between to get someone unstuck, whatever works. Yeah. Right. And then the next thing is performance. So it's all about trying to get someone to perform better. I know at Bliss Champions, we're in the seam. We do both of those equally well, but we're trying to open this magic doorway. And that's what the image behind me is, to say, hey, what about joy? Yeah. Have you given joy in your own desires enough consideration? And do you even know how to think about your desires anymore? Yeah. Right. So that's kind of what you went through. It's like you had your exit, you had the money, you had the time, and you're like, oh shit, I don't know what I want. Yeah. Right. And that's the thing, is we're all trained on that other model. So we just don't know. And so that's why personal development can come in handy. Somebody that knows that path and has been there and done it. I don't know. One of my favorite books is Atlas Shrugged. There's a character in that book called Francisco, and Francisco is almost like, the Bruce Wayne character, the flamboyant billionaire that people respect yet, condescend. And he's personally recruiting all the best entrepreneurs. And I like to play that role. And then I think of my partner, Patrick Combs, as the guy I'm trying to get him to, right? The John Galt character. And so it does take that, because at first, they're so entrenched. You're the patriarch or matriarch in your whole network. You're the richest person, everyone's in your pocket. Everyone's relying on you, and you're respected while at the same time hated. And, you're so entrenched. Like, it takes a Francisco character to actually quietly recruit that person and be in their ear, and ask them the hard questions. Are you really, how's your joy meter? Where are you at? Are you even happy? Yeah. And that's exactly why we started publishing the Entrepreneur's Hierarchy of Needs assessment. It's because it dials in the truth. Because when you're writing these numbers and you're doing, because it's not happiness, because that's kind of ambiguous. Happiness is momentary pleasure. So it's different than joy. Joy is when you give your greatest gift, which means you're aligned with your purpose, right? So I hear people say all the time that money can't buy happiness. And I get the sentiment. And I say, Yeah. I mean, if you're like really into exotic cars and you can buy a Lambo and actually go out on the weekends, that's momentary pleasure. Now, is it sustained happiness? You could argue that, but I would argue that money can't buy joy, because joy is when you give your greatest gift. What you're doing with this podcast is you're really aligned with your purpose, most likely, and you're giving your greatest gift. And, me too. My greatest gift is not to become a billionaire. It's to actually, inspire people and brainstorm with people and get them moving in the directions that they want to go, to get them from this fishbowl to the other one. And when we do that, we feel great joy.
Well, what it seems to me is that the joy is the fuel for the dream.
Yeah. And inspiration is serious fuel as well. I think most people discount inspiration. I hope they don't turn it into a dirty word like they have motivation. It's like, if you say motivational speaker, most people cringe.
They cringe, yeah.
It's like, oh, really? We did that in the last 20 years. We took a word and we ruined it. And so hopefully we don't do that to inspiration, because inspiration is incredibly important fuel to put into your vehicle as you take a journey to joy.
Yeah. And from my perspective, inspiration can really be found anywhere if you're trained to look for it. It's kind of like, when you buy a new car, the reticular activating system works and you see your car everywhere now. You learn how to look for inspiration and allow yourself to be inspired. I was closed off with allowing myself to be inspired. So I was hard-headed for a while.
And motivation's external, right? So motivation is like someone like Elon Musk, whose dad told him he would never amount to anything. And he could be motivated his entire life, even after the dad's dead, to prove dad wrong, or to prove, people prove that teacher wrong, or that person that fired him wrong. Inspiration, though, is internal, right? And so I like to see that be the driver of people. But how many times have you seen people like they go to a movie? Remember when we used to go to the movies?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So you go to the movie and you see something amazing that inspires you. I don't care what it is. Maybe it's the new Rocky series or something, and or Creed. And you come out super inspired and you're like, I'm going to take up boxing, or I'm going to run a marathon. You haven't even made it to your car yet. You turn your phone back on, and all of a sudden you get distracted by social media and text. By the time you sit in your car, the inspiration's gone and it's forgotten. And so I'm just one of those guys that has always bottled up my inspiration, and I save it and I use it for the appropriate time. And I don't believe that it expires in 48 hours. People will try to say that. And I go, if we're taking averages, you might be right, but it doesn't need to. It can be like a cologne that you just throw on when you're ready. So my whole life is fueled by inspiration, and, everything is now put through the lens of joy. If it's not joyful to me, I'm not going to do it.
And it's great to have delineation. A lot of people, I don't think, do, and that's an awesome first step. So two questions. One, what was the process like coming up with this comparison chart? What was, developing it in your own life and bringing it to life?
Yeah, I think Francisco's job in the Atlas Shrugged is obviously way harder than people realize, right? And so hard it has to be totally secret. It's also not hard to get the attention of very busy and successful entrepreneurs, right? They'll end up talking to me eventually. However, they come to me through different directions. And, it's my job in 30 minutes or less. But unlike Francisco in the movie, I'm not necessarily known to them unless they've done a little research on me on Google or whatever, or they already know me in advance. So I have about 30 minutes to convince somebody, right, of what I can see in their lives, why they've been targeted per se to consider this journey to Galt Valley. And, the excuses that you hear are super, super consistent. Right. And so I say often as a coach, it's like you instantly get a degree in, psychology, because it's so easy to see the patterns. Right. But the main thing is I don't have the time. Right. So what you're really saying is you don't have time for these magical moments, right? Like these incredible moments of joy. I don't have time. And so what I know that to be translated to in my world is, if you don't have time for your bliss, then you don't know what your bliss is, and you haven't placed a high enough value on joy. Because if you did know your bliss and you did value joy, you wouldn't have time for anything else. Yeah. Right. And so ultimately the other quick thing that people go to is sacrifice, right? They think that we would want them to sacrifice everything to come do this other thing. that's not a good strategy. If you've got a company making you a bunch of money and it's not completely sucking the life out of you, then maybe it's best strategically put into place, but also give yourself this other gift.
Yeah.
And I just see so many people that busy themselves up. You know, I own over 20 companies. I do my own accounting. At the end of the day, like, people are just so exhausted by one business. And I just know that they're ripe for change, right? And at the end, are they open to learning different ways to do things to become more efficient? I mean, you heard probably the story about how Bill Gates, when he met Warren Buffett for the first time, they were comparing their days, and Bill Gates is like trying to impress him, like, every minute of every day is planned. I have multiple secretaries, all this stuff. And then he asked Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett's like, oh yeah, that's not my day at all. I leave like 6 hours for reading. I usually read a book or two a day. Like, Gates' mind was just blown, right? So there's always a different way. I know a guy that owns over 600 LLCs, total baller, right? But his lifestyle is also amazing. He has time freedom, he has financial freedom. And so there's always better ways. But ultimately, what we needed to do is to be able to show people side by side that there's a different way. And then, of course, tapping into, hey, are you feeling at all like life has been unfair lately in all your success?
Yeah.
Right. So that person, if they can admit to that, is probably ripe for becoming a BlissPreneur. And it's just so magical. Look at Yannick as a great example of somebody that has a really good company, strong company. And he's a guy that has plenty of fun, a lot of joy and happiness with him. But he had something inside him. He had a secret ambition. Mm-hmm. If anyone knew Yannick, he's always doodling, right? And I remember when I gave my speech at Mavericks, he was doodling the whole time. I'm like, I didn't know him that well. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? What is that?
This guy doesn't care about anything he's saying.
But he's not just like taking notes. He's also like drawing you, I don't know, doing something cool on a Harley or something. So ultimately I approached him and I said, hey, I want to invest in that. And it was almost like laughter, right? Like, what do you mean you want to invest in my doodling? I'm like, yeah, clearly you love that. And that makes you feel alive. And you need to share that with the world. And so that's what we do, is we find that secret ambition, and we're not worried about whether you can monetize it or not, or what all your limiting beliefs might be, because we want people to do what they love. And ultimately, he ends up doing the journal, and we invested in the first 888 books. I don't remember why he picked that number, but that got out, and most of it went to Mavericks customers and our customers. But then Hay House picked them up.
Oh, nice.
How often does a self-published situation get picked up by Hay House?
Rarely,
never. Right. And then that led to like a set of playing cards that he's now done.
Yes.
Cosmic Journal and the Cosmic Cards. So
I own them.
Again, Yannick's made a lot of money in his lifetime, and this might not be his biggest money maker, but I can tell you he's really proud of it. Mm-hmm. Right. And it makes him come alive, and he's super excited. So if anyone calls him and says, hey, can you do this podcast? We want you to talk about the Cosmic Journal. He'd probably clear his whole schedule, right?
Yep.
So that's how bliss works. And, there's two paths to enlightenment. One is to follow your bliss, and that's been thoroughly documented by Joseph Campbell and all his research. Mm-hmm. Well, the other is through presence practice. And so that's why you see Buddhist monks, sitting in a temple, right? Focus on their breathing. And so a lot of people try, it's very trendy to do meditation, stuff like that. Well, what we're trying to do is get rid of the roommate, right? So that we can simply be with our own pure thoughts and experience joy and self-love and peace with all that chaos, blocked out. And so if those are the two paths, then I know I'm spending my time right. And that's where you want entrepreneurs to kind of, come in and give themselves both of those gifts. And I know me, I have a presence practice right now. I've got a coach for that that's very accomplished. And then over on the other side, I've been, slaying my dreams for 2 decades, but now I'm a BlissPreneur. So what I'm really doing is serving myself up copious amounts of joy.
Yeah. And that's the only way. I've learned to love joy. It's so funny, like what I used to be and versus who I am now. I almost love everything. Like it's a little bit like wild compared to who I used to be. Like the things that I actually can derive joy from are so simple, because now I have this method, I guess, in myself, where it's like, I just the gratitude of everything brings me so much, light, I guess. So one last question before I let you go. Do you have to go through, do you feel that you have to go through that first 7 levels to be able to get to the second 7 levels and become a BlissPreneur?
Gosh, it's interesting. It's, what happens most often, actually, that I see most often is something, a tragic occurrence.
Yeah.
Right. So we could try to coach up our different philosophies on levels and linear movements and the whole thing. But what I see most often at the middle age, 40 to 60, is a divorce, crippling divorce, or a business fails, or someone's health falters, right? Something gets taken away from them, or the sacrifices they've been making compound to a point where something tragic occurs. And so, a disproportionate number of people are coming from that. But the great news is that they're courageous, right? And the comeback is greater than the setback. And so I love working with people. I don't want any of that shit to happen to anybody, but I love working with people that have the courage to survive that. And so I don't get too caught up on the number of things or the linear things. But like I said, personal development's 2 areas. Why are you stuck? Right. And if you can't help someone get unstuck, they need to keep looking for that thing that's going to make them unstuck. For instance, I know people that have such trauma in their lives that ayahuasca is the only thing that's worked for them. They've tried everything in the personal development industry. I know people have spent $1 million on personal development to no avail. And that's why we need to search. And I wish there was a test, right? An aptitude test to say, hey, Reiki will work best for you. Hey, Eric, talk therapy for you. Hey, Tim, great. Magic mushrooms for you, buddy. And at the end, I wish there was something that could do that. Anybody that says they have that app, I would probably question the existence of that. But in the end, I wish that could be made. Maybe someone will figure out a way. But then get that help that you need and then come out of that stuckness. And that's where it gets really magical and fun. And I just hope people will consider joy as part of the option. And Tim, there's going to be a lot of people listening to this that are like still in that mindset of, but that all sounds great. Tim had a big exit. Eric sounds like he's pretty wealthy if he's building a yacht. And, this is the way wealthy people think. And they would really be missing the point that this is why I've become wealthy. And so I have a lot of friends that see me as retired the last couple of years. And I've made more money as a BlissPreneur in 4 years than I made in 25 years as an entrepreneur. And so, I think that the world's biggest limiting beliefs, are I'm not enough and I won't be loved. And I think in the entrepreneur community, the third one, even in the creative community, is I have to choose between doing what I love or I desire and making money. I think that's bullshit. I got a lifetime of evidence that says it's bullshit. I have all the toys that venture capitalists and hedge fund managers have. So at the end of the day, I've done nothing but pursue my dreams and do things that bring me joy. And so, those of you at home, you think it's linear, it's not. I just wish you would realize that it isn't. You don't only get to make this jump in the fishbowl because you have money, right? Yeah. You can choose joy first, and then you'll probably find that if you align with something you love, you'll be way better at it. You'll work harder and be more successful. And so I don't know, I think you've put together some really good work and it's a really good guide, and hopefully that will help someone get unstuck and perform, but everybody's different. So you never know what's going to work with someone. When I train a class of 8, I know 4 of them are talk therapy is going to work. And then the other 4, I'm like, okay, what's it going to take? Do I need to go help this person jump off a waterfall with their eyes closed? Right. Right. Or do I have to take this person in a Ferrari and take them at 180 miles an hour? Like, you just never know. And so everybody is so unique. But it's important that we seek that which causes us to be stuck and get unstuck.
Yeah. Getting started, right? Just even appreciating the things that don't work. It's still a win. And that's something that took me a minute to understand, is that even though I'm doing things that didn't work, I took the path that was scary and I tried and I moved forward and I've evolved. Rock on, man. Yeah.
You want to hear a really, so you and I sound really optimistic, and, we want the best for everybody. So what's the alternative of that? What's the ugly side of what could happen? Sometimes, if I'm chatting with someone and they kind of are a little bit worried, for instance, say, pick a generation, maybe millennials, right? You're a millennial, right?
I think so. I think I'm right on the edge. Yeah.
Right. So millennials are always fucking getting picked on. But in the end, look at millennials, for instance, and probably the most talented generation I've ever seen. I would describe a lot of my talented millennial friends as, you know what? I'm not going to do it like my parents. I'm going to extend my 20s into my 30s, and I'm going to continue to have a good time, right? Yep. I'm going to listen to all the right podcasts. I'm going to read all the right books. I'm going to go to all the right events, and I'm really going to enjoy my life. Okay. As long as you don't push all your dreams off and you're not only always collaborating with everybody else's dreams and forgetting about your own, yeah. Because what could happen is that you could wake up at 40 without a pot to piss in.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I had a strategy there to not be like my parents, but now I'm dirt broke. I'm 40 years old and I'm disillusioned. And the really ugly humor in that is that if Tim, if you and I wanted to be for sure billionaires, what we would do is we'd start a company, we'd call it After Burning Man. And we would hire up all the psychologists in the country, and we'd sit back and wait for that type of individual to come our way. Yeah. And we would have to do a lot of psychological work to help that person understand that thinking that they did it all the right way doesn't mean they did, and what happened to their dreams and why aren't they where they want to be in life and stuff. That's the dark side. So let's not confuse hedonism, with joy. And so while you're having all that fun, and as a Gen Xer, you could be right. In the end, millennials, hell, man, extend your 20s and your 30s and then sacrifice the beginning of your 40s and come back strong. And we don't know what's going to happen, yeah. Right? And then all of a sudden, that could be the better model that everybody wants to follow. And I'm not trying to pick on any one generation, because I definitely wish I had more fun in my 30s at times, right? So I just think we need to be aware. Are we chasing hedonism or are we chasing joy? And chasing joy is a very, very healthy thing that I encourage you to do. Yeah. That's just an old guy trying to give a little bit of advice.
It's sound though. It's sound. Yeah.
I'm not some stiff like hedge fund guy. I mean, I co-created the Warped Tour. I then went on to put on concerts around the world and, internship programs for college students. So in the end, I've had plenty of fun. I've lived my life. I've been to over 50 countries. And so I'm kind of like a hybrid of those two. Mm-hmm. But don't forget, joy is really worthy. Joy and love you just can't go wrong.
Yeah.
If you're going all out for those two things.
And it's obvious for anybody listening or watching. Every time I see a picture of you like smiling with your wife or with a group or whatever like that, you have one of those smiles that make people smile. I find myself like, it's contagious.
Look, I'm not perfect. We're all perfect on social media.
Perfect's boring.
In the end, I'm so geared. I think there's two levels of really great states. One is beingness, right? And one is doingness. And Eckhart Tolle would be like 80% beingness. He probably tells his staff, like, don't expect me to do a lot of shit because I'm in beingness most of the time. I'm like 90% doingness, right? So I'm only about 10% beingness. So I want to improve on that because I'm always focused on creating the next magical moment that sometimes I forget about this moment.
Yeah.
Right. And so I load up my year with magical moments like Yannick. Yannick's great at that as well. And I can't speak to him when he's present, but can I be just sitting downstairs watching the sunset and be super, super present by myself and have the same level of joy that perhaps I have when I'm doing some magical moment, in Antarctica doing a, polar plunge like he's probably doing right now.
Yeah.
So that's my work to do. I'm not very good at that. I suck at waiting, right? I don't enjoy waiting and I don't fill that waiting time very well or very constructively. But we all have our work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an important realization that we all have work to do. And that kind of like, it's humbling in a sense, because it really humbled me when I realized like how damaged I was from certain things growing up and decisions I made and whatever. And I'm like, oh, we're all damaged. just for different reasons. Like we all have our different ups and downs, and they affect us all differently.
It's known entrepreneurs that are a much higher rate of mental unwellness.
Yeah.
Then there's a lot of psychologists making a living off of, therapy for entrepreneurs right now. So that should wake you up real fast. There's a lot of pressures on us that a lot of other folks don't deal with. I used to say when I was a hardcore entrepreneur, and I wouldn't say it this way anymore, but I believed this at the time, that, when an employee has a bad day, they go home and they brush it off, but when an entrepreneur has a bad day, they go home and throw up. And so there is a difference there. I'm not saying, And so at the end of the day, there's some reality to that statement, right? So take care of yourself. Self-care is really, really important, but check in with your joy. It's just such an incredible subject. And if you don't know much about joy, study it. Start to develop what joy means to you. It's not just momentary pleasure, that can be purchased actually. So if you're focused on making more money, you will come across opportunities, first class seats, for instance, brings me momentary pleasure for a 4-hour flight. It just does. Right. And as long as I can afford to buy them, I know that I can always, and then there's a whole nother level, like private jet, private aviation. Oh my God, I don't have to check in and go through TSA. So, I'm simplifying happiness, but in the end, joy is something that's pretty different.
Joy is perpetual. Yeah. Cool. I really, really love that you shared that chart with us, or both charts. That really put a lot in perspective. I actually took a bunch of notes. The languaging of that is really powerful. And it's a pleasure to know you, man. It's really a pleasure to know you, and know that there's other people out there just trying to alter the way things are. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure. And I had a good time today. It's my favorite subject to talk about. Obviously, I can go for days. Yeah. And all of you out there, I wish you all the best luck in the world this year in 2022, and make great things happen.
Yep. All of Eric's information will be down in the show notes. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and I'll see you on the next one.